welcome to Working Dragon Mystic, where we discuss real metaphysical and occult content so you can manifest real and tangible results in your own life. Tonight, here in the community, we're going to continue talking about our Mage Minded series. More specifically, we're going to be talking about mastering your words and honestly, what I would call true words of power. Okay, now words of power are something I get asked about a lot. I don't think there is a week that goes by that I don't get some direct message or email regarding words of power. For those watching who may not know, and when people talk about words of power, they're thinking about a word that you can utter, you can say, that just the utterance of the word creates a manifestation or a change, right? To be truly, purely, absolutely honest, in that context, I have never found a single functional word of power. And I have spent a lot of money researching it. I've got expensive books on the topic. I got one book I paid like $250 for, biggest waste of money in my life. Yeah, pretty close to it. And I got other books that weren't quite that expensive that the Magick system produced results. But if you just utter the word without the ritual styling or the intonations, it does nothing. Okay. And to me, that's not a word of power because the word of power, by its definition, you just speak the word. You don't need to know the process or anything. You just speak the word. You just know the word, right? And it creates a mass manifestation. The closest thing to a mass manifestation word I've ever seen is if you go to the beach and yell shark. That will create a change. That will create a change and probably get you arrested. But most of these, you have to do specific ritual steps. And in all honesty, you could do the same ritual steps, not use the word, and get the same results, right? So that's why I say I've not found one by the traditional definition. That's not to say like these magical systems don't work. They do work, and some of them I've found quite useful. And if that's something we want to dive into on the community, we can do that. But when we're talking about actually mastering words and what I view as true words of power that are literally important for the magician, I am talking about your everyday words, what you say. Okay. Now, we know as magicians, as mages, as practitioners, the words we use in ritual matter, right? We focus our words, what we're saying, how we describe what we're saying. Most of the time, you will hear people say, don't talk about it in the future tense, always talk about it in present tense, because the future tense is never now. So you're always pushing it further down the road. So how you're saying it does matter when you're doing a spell, a ritual, or something like that. And I absolutely agree with that. Now, with that being said, though, if you look at the laws of the Magus or the laws of the Magi, there's one in there that people quote all the time: be silent. Okay. This is one of those laws that pops up in a lot of philosophy, actually, not just magic, about, don't talk about your magic. And there's a lot of people who think if you talk about your magic, if you mention it, your magic does nothing. You can't talk about it. You can't talk about magic at all. It's absolutely secret. Unless somebody's already a practitioner, you're not allowed to talk about it. I think my YouTube channel, by and large, kind of kills that ideal. However, there is the concept of not saying too much. Like, seriously, have you ever heard the concept of say little? Or don't say everything you know. These are old wisdoms. I mean, you see it in the Havamal. You see it in Chinese proverbs, Italian proverbs. That is kind of where I do view that is, don't say too much. Think about what you're saying. Consider what you're saying. Really think before you speak. And consider what you're saying, because your words, your speech actually does have power and it creates a lot of changes. Just think of how quick you can trigger an emotional response, good or bad, with what you say and how you say it. I would highly encourage all practitioners to meditate on how they present themselves, how they talk, how they present it. because you can take the same words and present it differently and trigger a different response. We from the South, we have a phrase. We can use it 1,000 different ways depending on how we use it. That's bless your heart. Now, bless your heart could be literally like we could be trying to comfort you, bless your heart. Or we could be insulting you pretty badly and be like, oh, bless his heart. Like we really can't. And Southerners can hear that difference. We can hear it. At the same time, there's phrases like, well, that must be good for you, right? That phrase alone, depending on how you say it, can mean a lot of things. Like I could be sincere when I say, that must be good for you. Something good's happened. You got a promotion. I'm happy for you. And then we've all heard it. We've all known somebody in our lives. Well, that must be good for you. They're condescending as hell because yes, something good's happened for you, but let's be honest, they're jealous, they're spiteful, whatever. That inflection can trigger different responses as well. Okay. Now, sure, this is all about communication, but think about it. We talked about mastering your thoughts, mastering your actions. Your words are one of those. And I would also say consider what you say around all people, friends and enemies alike, because today's friend might be tomorrow's enemy. And everything you tell somebody, everything you share is just something they can use as ammunition against you if they so choose. So whatever you speak, make sure you're behind it 100%. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Consider those things. However, and this is kind of an important one for me, and this is one that it's really fallen out of culture. I can't really find anywhere where this has become, where it hasn't. Say what you mean and mean what you say quite literally. Like when you say it, mean it. And if you say something, follow it through with actions. Now, this is super important for a practitioner. If you say something, follow it up with genuine action. This is super important for the practitioner. Think about it. If you say you're going to do something, you're going to meditate on something, you're going to do a ritual, you're going to research a project, you're going to do a spell working, you're going to mow the yard, whatever it is you say you're going to do, like you're talking to a friend, you're going to call them, but you don't, right? And you don't do it. This seems like such a minor thing to most people. And this is something, honestly, I can't find, it's hard anymore to find people who don't do this. Like if they say it, it doesn't matter. However, to the practitioner, this is a death sentence because quite literally, you're telling your subconscious your words have no power. Your words mean nothing. That is what you are programming your subconscious with, because you don't follow through with the very thing you spoke, right? Anything you speak, you're speaking into reality. So if I say I'm going to do X today, I need to be trying everything I can do to get to X. And yes, there may be plenty of things that stop me from getting to X, but my actions were trying to get to X. And it may be tomorrow before I get to X. Great. My subconscious sees that drive. It sees it moving forward. However, if you say you're going to do X and you just procrastinate, you put it off, you don't do anything, you don't care about it, or you have no intentions of attempting to do it, you are literally telling your subconscious that what you speak doesn't matter. Now, if you teach your subconscious your words don't matter, what will that then do to your spell working? Think about that. Your thoughts create your words, right? Your words are the expression of your thoughts. And your subconscious is learning your words don't matter, which means your thoughts, your intents don't matter. That's not a lesson a practitioner wants to teach their subconscious. You need to make sure that what you say actually holds meaning. Now, that's not to say you can't make a joke, because if I tell a joke, the joke has a start, it has a middle, it has a punchline, right? It's a complete thing. It's not like I'm just leaving it hanging there out there randomly. That's not to say you can't tell jokes. You can, but you also do need to consider what you're saying, when you're saying it, how you're saying it, who you're saying it to. You know, observe the room. You've heard that a lot. Read the room, pay attention. One of my mentors told me it's always better to listen than to speak. Okay, that is one thing that he absolutely drilled into me is observe more than you speak, right? And honestly, that was a great lesson because if you don't know about a thing or a subject that's being talked about, it's best to say nothing and just don't talk about it. You know, do not speak on something you don't know or understand because if you're trying to talk about something you don't know, don't understand, it's a great, it's a surefire way to identify a real fool. It absolutely is. Um, what else was? Oh, now, of course, if you are in one of those conversations and it's a topic you don't know about, right? Does that mean you have to sit there in silence? No. Ask questions. Show your willingness to learn. Show your willingness to grow, but don't act as if it's a topic you're versed in. There is a difference there, okay? And this is something I encounter a lot. I do mean a lot, where people will actually try to chime in on every subject and they don't know anything about it. You see this a lot in Norse, where people chime in about Norse mythology and all they've seen is Marvel movies. And well, let's be honest, Marvel, not a good source of Norse mythology. Oh, or that God of War game they got now. Okay, guess it's old at this point. It's a few years old at this point or more. People start reciting it as Norse mythology, and it's not. It's inspired by, but it is not Norse mythology. Right? So those are things that you can quickly identify a fool with because yeah. And then there's always, if you don't speak a lot, like you don't overshare, if you make a habit of speaking meaningfully, what you say is meaningful, but you also keep it reined in, speak little, but make it meaningful. You also shore up the risk of running your mouth and saying too much in a topic. I think we've all had that encounter in our life where we said too much, or we know someone who just don't know when to shut up. They keep digging their hole deeper. Same concept, right? So you want to consider those things. And that is really, it trains our discipline too. It also slows us down to make us think, right? One should never speak. Generally speaking, this is something one of my mentors drilled into me. Actually, several of them have drilled into me. You shouldn't say anything you haven't thought about. You should think about it well before you speak it. And most of the time, when you think about it, half the time you're going to find out it really doesn't, it's not going to matter to the conversation. And you should speak thoughtfully, not emotionally. And that's a huge one that honestly, this day and age, most conversations I've seen with people, they start speaking emotionally and they're not thinking. They are absolutely not thinking. And that's not a state you want to be in. If you're at an emotional state, you want to be as quiet as possible, center yourself, and you want to get back into logic and reason before you start running your mouth because you want to be able to respond. You don't want to react. You want to be able to respond to the conversation. Okay. But honestly, when it comes to mastering your words, this is kind of where a lot of this is coming from. It's disciplining your words, learning how you speak, how you compose your words, thinking how you present it, right? And different communities, different social groups, it will differ. There's no one single set way. And learning to communicate, learning to understand, and learning to observe and building those disciplines is very important. Those disciplines will carry over to every aspect of your magic as well. Any time in your life where you can train discipline, it will carry over into those other things. For example, I will use words, dialect, and lingo around my military friends and family that I will not use around civilians because they're just not going to understand it. And there's plenty of ways that I would communicate with those friends that is not polite in other company. And I wouldn't do that if I was to go, if I was just going out to eat at a restaurant or something. I'm going to mind my manners, mind my language. Or if I'm meeting somebody the first time, I'm going to mind, what I say, how I say it. Um, because I'm going to try and figure out what topics I can talk about and what I can't. I'll be honest with you, 90% of my life, unless I know the person, I avoid things like religion and politics. I'll be honest. And that may seem weird considering, I run Working Dragon Mystic, but I do. I actually do not talk a lot about my work unless it's someone I know well and they know what I do. If I'm just meeting someone, I'm just chatting. If they ask what I do for work, I will tell them I'm a teacher. I usually tell them I teach occult topics and philosophy. And if they ask further, I will share more, but it's if they're interested in it, right? Um, but I generally don't bring it up myself. I absolutely prefer to let them do most of the talking. I love to ask questions more when I'm in public and around people. I like to learn about them, right? I like to understand what they've got going on. Um, that's honestly how I lead most conversations is with questions as opposed to talk about me. And it's two parts really because A, I don't like talking about me, and B, running Working Dragon Mystic, I have to talk about me a lot and I get tired of talking about me. But, as when you're doing this, you kind of have to do it, right? So I have to be more talkative and more outgoing personality wise than I probably would be in my private life, right? But that's a job specific thing. And many of you will know I'm also mindful what I share here, even. There's a few community members, they've gotten to know me pretty well. Um, and there's things I will say in a private conversation with them that I won't say publicly just because that's not wise, if that makes sense. But as practitioners, though, we need to also consider what are we speaking in reality, right? How are you handling what you say about yourself? What do you say about yourself? What are you teaching your subconscious about yourself, right? So this is one I get a few messages on quite a bit because I will make jokes that I'm an idiot. I'm just a stupid redneck wizard or the likes, all these little things. And people's like, you shouldn't put yourself down like that. I absolutely agree. If you're actually demeaning yourself, calling yourself stupid and these kinds of things, you absolutely should not. But I'll be honest, I don't believe those things. They're jokes. I know the difference between something demeaning myself and a joke, right? And secondly, I don't take the word redneck as an offense. I really don't. So that's not an offensive word to me in any shape, form, or fashion. So if you understand something's a joke, that's fine. Your brain should register it as a joke. However, at the same time, if you're calling yourself stupid and you're depressed and those kinds of things, your subconscious is going to grab onto those things. It is. There's a completely different scenario there. Now, for most people, yeah, I'd say absolutely don't say those things if you're not sure of yourself, if you don't have that confidence already, if you've not built yourself up, you probably should avoid those because it can be hard to find that line between is this an area where you're joking or is this something in your brain that you might be listening to yourself even though you're laughing? Because if you make a joke to your friends, right? Like, I'm an idiot, right? If you make that joke to your friends because socially it's acceptable, everybody's laughing, it lifts the spirit of the room, but inside you're honestly thinking, I am really fucking stupid. I cannot believe I did that. I can't believe I failed this test or I did this. Oh my God. And you in your brain, you are thinking you're stupid. Just because you cover that with laughter and call it a joke doesn't make it a joke. So part of mastering your speech, part of mastering your words is understanding your thoughts. That's why we talked about mastering your thoughts first. because your thoughts and having your thoughts right before you ever open your mouth is so vitally important. And you will notice we also talked about actions first because you need to know your actions. You need to follow through with actions. You need to apply actions to life and towards your manifestations. What did we just say earlier here about if you say you're going to do something, if you say something, you need to follow through, right? Because your subconscious will literally start to learn that when you say something, you don't mean it. And if you don't mean it, your spells aren't going to manifest. Crazy, ain't it? A lot of people don't put a lot, think about this. And there's a lot of philosophy books and stuff that will talk about this. They usually refer to it as correct speech. And immediately, the number of people I've seen who will read that title, correct speech, and slam a book closed and throw it. How dare you tell me how I'm supposed to talk? How dare you tell me what words I can use? How dare you, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. They just like, they get wound up into an offended tissy so fast. They didn't even take time to read what was meant by those words. Okay. They didn't. And that is sad. So, yeah, I chose mastering your words for this topic because technically it's the same thing, but it does actually come in quite well, right? And like I said, you will see different things of this all over the place. There's a few little quotes that I found on this topic that I found fun. One of them is if the bird hadn't sung, it wouldn't have been shot. In other words, if he'd been silent, he'd been just fine. And that's a Japanese proverb, is what it was listed as. Um, let's see. I got another one here. Where was that one? Yeah, this one's Chinese. It's a proverb. You always win by not saying the thing you don't need to say, right? Again, you're seeing that importance of minding your words, listening more than you speak, right? Confucius had a quote: "A superior man is modest in speech, but exceeds in his actions." Right, so he's more action than words. Um, there was one, yeah, there it is. Think before you speak. Yeah, think before you speak, but do not speak all that you think. I do like that one. Um, oh yeah. There was one. Where did I record that one? Oh, yeah, this is it. This is another Chinese one. I wanted to share this one. Outside noisy, inside empty. I have always loved that one. And perhaps one of the things that always makes it hard for me to record and stuff is I have to talk a lot. And I don't like that because most of my life I have been taught to observe more than talk. Because, in all honesty, truthfully be told, the noisier a person is, the more they won't shut up, the less wisdom they seem to have. And in most areas of philosophy, from the Havamal to Stoicism, this is a constant thing that keeps going. If they can't shut up, odds are there's not a lot going on in their brain because, yeah. So that's generally what that means. If they're overly noisy, overly talkative, odds are they ain't got a lot going on mentally wise. And it can be true. It can. I'm not going to say you won't run into occasions where it's a difference. Obviously, there are situations like content creators and the like where they have to be more energetic in front of the camera or something. So they do need to be a bit more talkative on that. So, um, yeah. So those are some of the fun ones I actually found. Great ones to little meditate on if you want my personal opinion. This one I never can pronounce this name. I want to say it's Aesop is the name. It's Aesop. I do kind of like this. In dangerous times, wise men say nothing, right? When shit is hitting the fan, when it is getting crazy, a wise man generally tries to say nothing. It's better to be quiet and observe and pay attention to what's going on. And in a lot of ways, if you think about it, that kind of goes back to that Japanese proverb about if the bird hadn't made the noise, it wouldn't have got shot. You know what I mean? All right. Everyone, I would highly encourage you to take some time, sit down and meditate on how you use your words, right? Even during this video, there were 2 times where I used a profanity, and honestly, I wish I had. Twice that caught my attention while doing this. And that's one of the things. Like, I do try to pay attention to what I say. I'm not always perfect at it. I will screw it up. There's been times I've lost my temper and shot my mouth off. I don't like when I do it. I actually prefer to say nothing when I lose my temper and calm back down and approach it later. That don't always happen, but it is something I always strive to do better. And I would encourage you all to do the same. Sit down, meditate on it, find out, you know, how can you improve your life, improve your path, and improve your magic by more discipline within your speech. But definitely meditating on things like, what are you saying you're going to do that you never follow through with, or that you don't do, or you're constantly procrastinating, that could be programming that subconscious and just undermining your magical practice, because your subconscious is learning your words are meaningless and empty. That is one of the things I would start immediately meditating on. And I would get your journal out. I would start making journal notes and entries and thinking about that and working to improve that discipline. Okay. Honestly and truly, that journal is going to be your friend here. Sit down, meditate on it, consider it. If you get in an argument, you lose your cool, go to your journal, write down, talk about it. What could you have done better? Examine yourself. How could you have improved that? How will you improve it in the future? How do you interact with your friends? Do you share too much information with people? Have you ever told a secret to somebody that someone used against you later? Okay, what lesson is to be learned from that? These are things that I would encourage meditating on regularly, and starting immediately, I'd get to meditating on them. I honestly and truly spend time daily meditating on these things. And I do try to, if I say I'm going to do something or anything like that, I try to make sure it is on my to-do list and it is a priority, because it is so important that my words aren't just empty words. They have sustenance to them. They have a direct effect in my actions and in what is in my life. My friends know me as somebody who, when I say it, you can take it to the bank. I'm not just going to forget about it. I'm not just going to walk away from it. And in fact, if I do forget about something, I feel horrible, because I'm old school. I do believe a man's word is his bond. If you say you're going to do it, you should do it. No excuses. Period. Don't care what it is. If you say you're going to do it, do it. I don't care. You know, it's just one of those things. All right, everybody. Hopefully this one was well received or understood. I know this one can be a tricky one. I know this one is not a popular one for sure this day and age, where everybody just wants to run their mouth about anything and everything. But at the same time, to the practitioner, how important it is to discipline your words, what you say about yourself, and how you follow through with your words in the mundane world, in reality, that drastically, and I cannot emphasize that enough, drastically can and will affect your magic, because you are literally programming your subconscious that your words, your spoken words, have no meaning. They have no power. They have no substance. And that is the last thing you want your subconscious to believe. All right. So take some time, meditate on this. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments below. If you're here live at the community, I'll be taking questions as soon as we finish recording. And until next time, everybody, I'm Drake. This has been Working Dragon Mystic. Take care. Bye-bye.